city-state of Hyderabad was established in 1724 by Nizam al-Mulk Asaf Jah. It was India's most prosperous state with an annual revenue of 9 crores. In 1798, Hyderabad entered into a subsidiary alliance with the East India Company, which meant that it became a protectorate of the company and eventually the British Crown. The day-to-day matters in princely states like Hyderabad were handled by the monarchy, but ultimately they were subjects of the British Empire. These monarchs would have to pay the British Crown taxes, fight their battles, and enforce their laws. Those who didn't were often replaced. This arrangement ensured that the Nizam kept control over his kingdom. But when the British retreated from India 150 years later, Hyderabad lost its princely status. This is the story of how India annexed Hyderabad. In 1947, the British agreed to leave India, leaving 2 states in their wake, the Muslim-majority Pakistan and the Hindu-majority India. The princely states had to choose to integrate with one of these 2 nations. The Nizam of Hyderabad, Osman Ali Khan, wanted to be completely independent. This was rejected by the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, and more importantly, by Sardar Patel. Patel was the head of the States Committee, and he began to pressure the Nizam with threats and promises to integrate with India. Despite these efforts, on 15th August 1947, as Nehru hoisted India's flag in New Delhi, declaring independence from British rule, 1,500 kilometers away, the Nizam declared his independence. In a last-ditch effort in November 1947, Sardar Patel agreed to a temporary treaty with the Nizam. This treaty focused on maintaining the status quo to prevent any further chaos during the partition. To ensure this, the Indian army would be removed from Secunderabad and no military action would be taken by either party. Just like with the British, the Nizam would continue to preside in Hyderabad, but the important decisions would be made by the Indian government. However, both sides began to ignore the terms of this treaty almost immediately. The Nizam loaned £15,000 to Pakistan, which only worsened Patel's fears that a hostile power was growing at the heart of the country. India responded by economically isolating Hyderabad, which in turn cemented the Nizam's belief that a break was inevitable. Much of the Nizam's anxiety was rooted in the fact that he was the Muslim ruler of a state of 16 million people, most of whom were Hindu. He and others in the aristocracy feared that rising communal tensions would lead to them being overthrown. Their answer to this problem lay with the Razakars. The Razakars arose in the 1920s. During this period, the non-cooperation movements launched by groups with ties to the Indian National Congress began to gain ground in Hyderabad. What was even more worrying for the aristocracy was the increasing influence of right-wing Hindu supremacist organizations. In response to this, a conservative Muslim party rose to power, the Ittehad-e-Muslimin. With the aim of protecting the ruling dynasty and Muslim interests, the MIM developed a paramilitary wing known as the Razakars or volunteers. They demanded and were granted special protection by the Nizam, turning them into his unofficial secret police. Over the years, as the Nizam relied on the Razakars more and more, they were given further leeway in just how far they could take their violence. In 1945, the Razakars tried to brutally suppress a communist-led peasant movement that demanded the removal of the Nizam. By 1948, the violence had spread outwards from Hyderabad into the villages and towns across the state. The Razakars used looting, murder, and sexual assaults to terrify an estimated 40,000 Hindus to flee the state, while thousands of others were unfairly jailed. As with other examples during partition, the Hindu population responded with raids and violence of their own, some of which were reportedly organized by the Congress or Hindutva-aligned organizations. By the end of this violence, more than 150 villages had been scarred, half of which were outside Hyderabad's borders. It seemed that the fires of partition had spread to the heart of India, and Patel would not allow this to go on any further. In September 1948, Sardar Patel received information that Hyderabad was planning to ally with Pakistan, and thus they would have enough strength to fully oppose India's influence. He relayed this information to Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who reconsidered India's approach in the face of their worst fears becoming a reality. On the 6th of September, the zealous Razakars fired upon an Indian outpost at Chilakalu village. This act of aggression lit the fuse, and the Indian army sent in tanks to the village of Kodar to force the Razakars to surrender. In response to this chaos, the government of India greenlit a military takeover from the Nizam, dubbed Operation Polo, named after the 17 polo grounds in the state of Hyderabad. In order to prevent international criticism, the Indian government framed the military assault as a police action. This informal invasion began on the 13th of September and took 5 brutal days to complete. More than 2,000 of the Nizam's fighters were killed, and another 3,600 were imprisoned. When the Indian armed forces entered Bidar, the Nizam was forced to surrender, and so the state of Hyderabad was absorbed into the Indian Union. However, if the intent of the takeover was to end the violence on the streets, Operation Polo did not succeed with the Nizam's surrender. After the Razakars were defeated, vengeful Hindus began to retaliate against ordinary innocent Muslims. Some reports mention that members of the Indian armed forces also joined in the looting. Prime Minister Nehru appointed a mixed faith committee called the Sunderlal Committee to investigate these incidents. The panel submitted its findings in 1949, but these were buried as it revealed that thousands had been injured or killed during a time when the Indian government had claimed to enforce peace and stability. As it is understood today, Operation Polo was the annexation of the princely state of Hyderabad into India through military force. A complicated history of political deals and communal tensions resulted in the exile of the Nizam. And even today, the region is marked by tensions over identity and representation. It remains an important and often overlooked part of the story of India.